Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's chapter for the FDOT Traffic Plan series. This week we're going to be talking about pavement markings, and that's going to be the new chapter 5. So basically we're going to look at creating proposed pavement marking features for our plans for the signing and pavement marking plan components. We're going to look at the DNC manager, the draw cell group by feature, as well as some microstation tools. You'll note that if you've ever been through the traffic plans course before and what we have available online, this is going to be a little bit different. Some of the tools and the way that I get to the end result a little bit different than what's in there. Let us go ahead and dig into microstation and get this show on the road. First thing you need to know, these are proposed features for the signing and pavement marking plans. So we are looking at the DSGN SP01 DGN. We created this particular file back in chapter 1. So the first thing that I need to do, it's an empty file, I need to go ahead and add my references. So I'm going to go to my references, open that dialog up, and I'm going to go to Tools, Attach, and I want my roadway plans to show up in here, so I have those as reference. So I'm going to go to roadway, and I'm going to grab the alignment as well as the DSGN-RD, and I'm going to attach those. And the align RDA, I want to make sure that I pay attention and I use the 50 alignment. I'm going to tell that OK. And the next thing is the design, and I want to see, basically I'm going to do this twice. I'm going to use the default because that's where all of the roadway stuff is. I'm going to attach that, but I need to go back in and attach the DSGN-RD again. One of the ways that you can use the tools that we're going to be going through today is to basically create construction lines, a whole lot of them. But it makes it easier and faster for us to get the tools because there's a lot of stuff that you have to, in essence, design as you go. It's not just a matter of just copying parallel, you know, the edges of pavement, or copying parallel for the curbs and or for the lane lines, etc. I mean, a lot of that is, but some of it's not. So I'm going to attach the design file again, and I have a model out here called construction lines. All right, and this has been developed just for the signing and pavement markings. Okay, so I'm going to attach that as well. All right, so I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go ahead and fit my view. All right, so that I can see all of this. And the course manual goes through and it talks about a lot of the other, it's like this whole project. But for time's sake, I'm going to go through and we're going to focus on this section here. Move that out of the way. There's a island, this lane here. So I've got 2 travel lanes as well as a bike lane that's going to come through. We'll have a left turn lane as well as we're going to transition the bike lane over next to the travel lane, and then you're going to have a right turn lane that's going to come in here between the edge of pavement and our island. Okay, it is a signalized intersection, so we're also going to come in here and put in some special emphasis crosswalks. So that's the basics of what we're going to try to get in here today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off a few of these things. So I have my file set up, I have my references attached. The next thing that I need to do is I need to go in and open up the DDB file. So I'm going to go to a couple different ways to do this. I can go to Geopack Road and Design and Computation Manager. If you use the FDOT Plans Development menu, and I know some people are still trying to get used to having these task menus out here, but if you use this, there's also under Quantities, there is a link here as well. If you don't want to go to the other menus, you can go to the DNC from here. because DNC is pretty critical for what we're trying to do, because we need to make sure that we tag everything no matter how we get the information into our files, whether it's using the new features or you're going to use the MicroStation tools or DNC Manager tools. It's important that we get everything tagged so that we can do our quantities and we can automate that. So DNC Manager, I've already done this, but anytime that you work on a project, it's a really good idea to go ahead and make a copy of the delivered DDB file that comes with the CAD software and create a copy of it in the SYMB directory for your project. So put it local with your project. That way, if anything comes up, you can make changes to this and all that information stays with the project. So a year from now, there's another DDB that comes out, you've made changes, you don't have to worry about anything being overwritten. The other issue is that if you do need to make changes, a lot of times if you're working with a client server setup, then you can't make changes to it anyway. You've got to copy it locally. All right, so I've already done that, and I have a DDB file sitting out here that we're going to work with today. Just some real basics for the DNC Manager. It has a lot of different modes sit in here. I can ID elements, I can display elements so that I can tell whether or not it's been tagged with the DDB attributes so that the DNC Manager sees those elements. It'll tell me if it's been done such that we can get in there and make our quantities, calculate everything. Design mode, we'll be using that some, not a whole lot, but that it sets all the symbology for us, adds that attribute tag, but it also allows us to draw the elements at the right symbology. Then we have the set mode. Set mode allows us to basically fix elements that are in the file. There may be times when I've changed things up a little bit. You may be going from, say, SS2 moving into SS4. You've already got some line work drawn. SS4, there's some changes in the way things work. It's looking for ad hoc in order to calculate everything. So using the set command will attach those for us so that we know we've got everything right. Or if maybe sometimes we go in and not thinking, you start drawing and you know you got the right symbology, but you've not used the DNC, so none of the other information's there, so the DNC just doesn't see it. We have the compute mode. The compute mode allows us to calculate our quantities, and we'll be looking at that more in a later chapter. Shape mode, there's only one pay item I can think of in pavement markings that you would even use this, and that is for the island nose paint. And I'm going to recommend that you don't use this because if whoever's doing the roadway design, if they're using the new features, which we hope they are, and the new civil tools, there's some intelligence behind what's going on behind the scenes, and elements that you see in the file, like this line, when it was placed as a civil cell, it sees that as being much bigger than what it is. So it can cause problems. So I recommend that you use the Create Region tool instead. And the big one that we're going to look at today is going to be the pavement markings. When I select pavement markings, it gives me 4 extra tools out here for drawing in my pavement markings. The other thing that I want to make sure that you see is under the design, there's some tolerances in here. We don't use custom line styles for our pavement markings, so you know this won't be a factor in anything that you do, but there may be times when this gap tolerance you may need to adjust, and this deduction tolerance shouldn't affect you guys either for pavement markings because it really the only thing that we have set up to use the deduction is the curb and gutter. So that's the basics to the DNC. With the pavement markings up here, what I'd like to do is start going through at this point and just let's start getting the markings in here. So exercise 5.1 was basically copying in the DDB. 5.2 is creating these special emphasis crosswalks. I have construction lines already available in here. Basically the center line of these crosswalks are here for me to use with the pavement marking tool. So the first thing I want to do is go down to thermoplastic, and the 12-inch markings for thermoplastic when you're using new pavement should be the standard 12-inch. There is an option if you look at the index 17 346 to use either standard or preformed. But we're going to show using the standard, wrong one, and that's under standard, solid, linear foot. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. So crosswalks 12-inch. Okay, so that's the one that we want to use. And I'm going to click on the striping tool, and it brings up the draw striping dialog. Basically, this tool is set up such that I can have multiple patterns defined for my striping at any given time. So I can set these up and then switch between them as I go. So maybe I can go ahead and set up the yellow and the white at one time and then, start doing my markings. Right now we're going to use the double stripe. And whatever I have highlighted in the DNC, if I click on this inside outside, it allows me to set that active so it can be separate lines, different lines, whether it's like 1030 skip with a solid yellow. In this case, we're going to use the same because I'm going to draw both lines at the same time. For intersections, if you look at the index, it's a minimum of 6 feet between the lines, and we've got a 12-inch stripe. So from the center line, these lines are drawn at the center line of our stripes. So from center line to center line of my stripes, that gives me another foot. So I'm going to change this offset between those two lines to 7 feet. All right, they are solid, so I'm going to leave that as solid, solid. My reference element, and this is why the construction lines come in real handy. I can use either a construction element, another design element that I have, an edge of pavement, for example, or a curb or a traffic separator line. So those would be my DGN elements, but I also have an option for chains. So if I wanted to take a portion of my chain, I need to set that up, I could go in here, grab my GPK file. I have to have the alignment information exported out from the roadway design file into the GPK file so that you guys can use this tool. Okay, but that is an option. You select the chain that you want, and then you get the big end of the station of the chain, and then you can modify that. So I could say from 701 to 705, and it would only draw between the station limits at an offset that I give it. But I'm going to go back to DGN, and under DGN I have a couple of options. I can use a single element, I can use a complex chain, or I can use a selection set. All right. So for this example, we're going to use a single element. I'm going to grab the identify DGN element and select it and accept it. When I accept it by data pointing on the screen, it gives me the length basically of my line. All right, so from 0 to 22.9 feet is how long that line is. I'm going to give it an offset of 0 because I'm drawing these lines in at the same time. So from here, it knows the distance between these two stripes, and it'll draw them 7 feet apart at whatever offset that I put from this line. So once I have all of this set up, I'm going to hit draw stripes, and notice that it puts it in there. Okay, since it's an offset of 0, I don't have to worry about whether I select to the left or the right. So when I set up distances and offsets, I don't have to deal with whether it's positive or negative. I just select as I move the cursor. In fact, I'll go ahead and I'll give this an offset so you can see it. As I move the cursor from one side or the other of the reference element, then it moves it for me. And then whichever side, I just data point when it's where it needs to be, and it draws it in. All right, so now I'm going to sit here and I'm going to click in the screen to accept it, and now these lines are drawn in. So I have two 12-inch lines. I'm going to go ahead and real quickly do that again. I need to grab the element, accept it, and draw the stripes. And grab this element, accept it, and draw the stripes. All right. Now, It only uses a reference element. It doesn't know to stop. So it's basically just copying parallel. All right, so it doesn't know to stop at this edge of pavement or to extend at that to the edge of pavement. So you'll need to go in and just use some MicroStation commands. You can go in and use the trim to element option and just select it, clean it up. You want to take it to the edge of pavement and make sure that one's hitting the edge of pavement. Okay, now that's placed in here, so this is all good. All right, the next thing that I want to do is underneath here, I just want to real quick show you, we do have a link to the design standards, and I want to use the current ones. So there is a section here for signing and markings. So I want to go in and look at, and these are all starting here with the 17344. The ones that you're going to use the most are going to be 345, 346, 347, and 352. These are for the RPM, special marking areas, the bike markings. So if I open up 17346, it takes us in here, and there is, I think, sheet 9 talks about our special emphasis crosswalks. So if you read the general notes, let me zoom in up here. It talks about what we need to be using. So I have to use preformed thermoplastic. I'm going to come down here, and it also tells me exactly how this needs to be set up. So basically, our special emphasis crosswalks, we're going to have 24-inch lines, and they line up with our lane lines, okay? Once I have all of those in, then I have a max in here, spacing between those 24-inch lines of 5 feet. And once I have the lane lines in, then I've got to place another one at the center of that lane. You don't want to put them in where the tire tracks are going to be. You want to make sure that they're in the center. Okay, so this will be a two-step process. We'll get the lane line markings in, then we'll go in and copy parallel. So this is really, for this part, it's pretty much just using MicroStation commands. So I'm going to minimize that, get back into MicroStation, and I don't need the draw striping tool, but I don't have to close it either. And I'm just going to push it over here to the side. I'm going to go to the preformed, solid, and I want to go down here and grab the 24-inch. All right, so for the 24-inch, and once I have that, make sure that you change this to the design mode. Because when I'm in design mode, I have the option to place influence. So anything that I draw, it will assign the correct attribute, and it will also use the correct symbology. All right, and I'm going to rotate my view. I'm just going to use this center line. Where'd my snaps go? I'll just put that up there. All right, so I'm going to rotate my view so I'm aligned with this crosswalk. And I'm going to go in and go ahead and draw the first line. So I need to get the place line command, and you can use the smart line or the place line, it really doesn't matter. And then if I double click on this item in the DDB, part of the key in, there is key ins for nearly every item that's in the database. Most of the time, a lot of them, all it does is just turns on the place influence. That way, if you forget, it goes ahead and turns it on for you. But sometimes there's also other tools, and in this particular case, it is bringing up this construct perpendicular from element. So if I snap to one of the lines, accept it, notice that now it's going perpendicular from this element. And I'm going to snap to the other end. And from here, it's simply a matter of copying parallel. I already have my lane lines in here, So I'm going to grab the move parallel. The first line, because you don't want it here, I'm going to turn off my distance. There's a lot of ways that you can get this into this file. One way would be to, oops, make copy. I don't want to do that. I meant to turn that off. If you have construction lines, you can just snap to the construction lines with the copy parallel. You can also use AccuDraw. That will also give you the ability to put it in. AccuDraw is one of those things you either love it or you hate it. You use it all the time or you don't. But that is an option. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to get this in here. Quickest is once I know where all my lane lines are, I can just go ahead and just place this in here. Okay, so there's all of my lane lines. All right, so now I'm going to go back over here and just copy parallel. So grab but I want to make sure it's a distance from, this is a 12-foot lane. All right, so I want to copy parallel half of that, which is 6 feet. Actually, but it's 11 and a half. It is, it's 11 and a half. And it's 11 and a half because back here, if I draw this exactly where it needs to be, for display purposes, if I draw it exactly where it needs to be, it tends to run together on your plan sheets, and it's very hard to differentiate the lane line for the paint or the thermo from your edge of pavement. This gives it enough of a gap that you can see it. It really should be 5 inches to the center line, but I've just used half a foot, 6 inches, and copied that parallel so that you can see that. It's a display issue for whenever you're doing your design. With the traffic separator, I had a little bit more room, so this is 12 feet, and I can change that to 6 and copy this parallel. And basically, you would just do this all the way across, in between, in the middle of every single one of your lanes. Okay, it's as easy as that. So there is the special emphasis crosswalk set in there according to the standards. It's not hard. It doesn't take long. Next thing that I want to add is this stop bar. Okay, it's going to go across my lanes, and it's going to go right here. I already have my dimensions of where it needs to go. Basically, I want to take it 4 feet minimum back, and so copy this. Basically, to get the dimension, it's just 4 feet over. But I need to, it's not going to be preformed. That needs to be standard. So I will go to standard and then linear foot and then the 24-inch for our stop lines. And place influences turned on. I've got my line command and simply draw in the line, and I need to extend it across the bike lane. And you've got a stop bar. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is look at using the draw striping tool again, and we're going to draw in some of the, we'll look at the yellow, we'll look at options to get the white solid lines in, the bike lane in, and get that information in here. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to get this yellow line in here next to the traffic separator. Ugh. All right, so let's rotate the view. And I'm just going to grab the tick marks so I can see what I'm doing. All right. So in this case, I'm not doing a double line. I just need a single. Okay, and I need to select in here, these are gross mile. We're going to just go ahead and use the open graded asphalt items, and I need a 6-inch yellow line. Okay, I can double click in here and it will, well, if I was in the pavement mode, and it will change this for me. So I need to make sure that I go from the design mode back to my pavement mode. And then I can do that, double click it, or I can click on this single button and it will also set it to the correct item in the DNC. It is a solid line. Leave that all alone. I'm going to grab the identify DGN element, grab that traffic separator line. Okay, it's going to be an offset of, again, 6 inches, and draw the stripe. And I now have the yellow line in here. Maybe some cleanup. In this example, I want to bring that all the way up to my stop bar. So I'm going to extend that line. All right, so my next yellow line is going to be out here with this curve. I'm going to change my option from single to selection set and grab these 2 lines. Okay, I've done this before. All right, let me make a quick selection set. And get the right mode. All right. I've done this before where you can also, and I think it may be because these lines are in a reference. If they're here, you can actually hit this button, select the lines, and then hit this button again and it accepts the selection set. But in this example, we're going to go ahead and create the selection set and then click on the identify DGN, which will accept that selection set. Okay, and then give it that offset, like I said, of 6 inches, and we're going to draw that stripe. Okay, again, this is just copy parallel. So I want to, not that button, I want to go into trim to intersection, and I'm going to trim these up so that they connect, make sure that these are, and they are. Okay. Another nice thing about these pavement marking tools is that they create graphic groups. So if you ever have to delete something and start over, it'll do that for you. Okay. So now that we have those in, we're going to take a look down here at this nose. And again, we're going to change this over to the double stripe. And I need this set to the 6-inch yellow instead of the 12-inch white. And then they're solid lines. The distance between these stripes is 4 inches, so that's 0.33. Even if I put more in here, it's going to round it to that. My offset needs to be set to 0. Create a selection set of these elements. And then that's 6-inch yellow. And then draw stripe. Let's select it first. All right. And then place those in there. All right. And I may not get every single piece of this correct exactly for what in the standards. It's a big thing that I want you guys to focus on as we go through this is how did I get the information into the file? Okay, you guys are going to need to go back, and when you're doing your design work, make sure that you go back and look at what's out there in the standards so that you're getting the right markings into your file. All right, next thing, let's look at some white paint. So I have that lane line in here. I also have and I'm not sure why that construction line is there like that. I don't know. Okay. I'm going to copy this into this file because I want this line to go all the way to my stop bar. So apparently I did something different when I set up these construction lines. Don't know what I was thinking, but I can copy them into my file. So let's go to copy. No, I still have a selection set. And let's copy that. Come on, snap. All right, so I've copied it and I want to extend it down to my stop bar. Something else that I can do, there's a minimum of a solid white line that needs to be placed in the file that is at least 50 feet. Okay, so I'm going to extend that. All right. So what I want to do is go find my 6-inch white. So I'm going to select that in the DNC, and I'm going to change this from my double stripe to my single stripe. Okay, and click on single to make sure that I've got the correct item, my 6-inch white. It's solid. I'm going to select a single element. I'm going to grab that line, and I know that I've got to go 50 feet back. Okay. All right. So in this case, my begin point would be at 0, but my end point, I don't want to take it all the way through the project because eventually after the 50 feet, I need to change it to the 1030 skip. Okay, so I'm going to change this to 50 at an offset of 0 and then tell it to draw the stripe. And notice that it's only 50 feet. All right. Part of my construction lines, there's a couple of ways that I could have done this. I can grab all of these as a selection set and just draw one line in here. But instead, I broke it. I went into the design standards for design speed of 45 miles per hour. The L1 value, which is the distance from where the taper starts to where your solid line needs to start, is 85 feet. Okay, so this line here is 85 feet long. All right, so I need to draw whatever this distance is, needs to be drawn in here. So I have two separate construction lines sitting, or actually I just copied that one in. So I can still use the single element, and I'm going to grab that line, accept it, and then tell it to draw this stripe in. Okay. Once I get past this 50 feet over here on this lane line, I would need to go in and start my 1030 skip. Okay. So that one works a little bit differently. So I'm going to change this from solid to the skip dotted, and I want the 6-inch white for the 1030. It's important that I grab the correct one. I'm going to double click on it so that I'm using it correctly, so that these each have ad hoc set up on them to calculate based on the skip values. Okay, but I do need to go in here and set this up. All right, so I have it, it is skip. I'm going to have it start on skip, and the stripe value is 10, but my skip value is 30. All right, I'm going to grab the single element again. So let's grab this line and accept it, but I don't want to start at the 50 feet. I mean, at the beginning, I need to go back 50 feet. Okay, and draw in this line. Offset is going to be 0, tell it to draw stripes, and notice that now I have the 1030. The way the DNC works, it draws individual elements across all of this, and this is why it makes it nice, and the way this tool works, to go ahead and figure out, okay, I've got a lane line here, just grab the construction element, you're just drawing this stuff in wherever it needs to go. And then it makes it easier to use this tool and a lot faster to have some construction elements. All right, and these are going to change a little bit. They're not drawn in here. Well, I'm just going to use these elements as they are. They're not going to be quite right, but you're going to get the gist of it. Okay, so let's go in here. I'm going to grab guidelines. This is a bike lane. This would be solid white, but this last 50 feet of this line right here needs to be the 2-4 skip. Double click on it, it changes to the 2-4. Make sure that you put in the values for your skip stripe. Select the element, and then, yeah, this isn't going to line up, but you guys get the point, and draw that in. All right. If you look at the index, it's 50 feet of the 2-4. There's at least a 30-foot gap here, and that's what this is, and then another 2-4, 50 feet of that. So this should be 50 feet. There we go. This one looks better. Draw those stripes in, and that one I want to start on the stripe. Okay, this line needs to be solid, so that would be 6-inch white, and grab that line and change it to the other. For time's sake, I'm basically just showing you how this works. I'm not going to do all of this in here, but I could place that white line, place this white line. This line right here is 8-inch, so I could draw that in. I can use this line right here to copy parallel the 6 inches that I need for that white line. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to get this stuff in here, but the big thing is, how do I use this tool? There is definitely going to be more detail as far as placing each one of these in the exercises when we get the manual out, but I'm trying to get all this information in. All right, so we've talked about the 6-inch white, solid lines. We've talked about some of these other lines, like this one too. This one was 610. 610. Select that 85-foot line. And draw that line in there. All right, so if I had, median openings, you'd use the 610 yellow. So we've talked about most of the solid line, the stripes, and this is great for getting all of the striping in. I love this tool. I've done some signing and pavement marking plans and used it. It makes it fast and easy, as well as easy to quantify whenever you get done. All right, so I'm going to close this tool for now, and let's go back and look at some RPMs and some arrows. Okay, RPMs are it's above all the different types, so pavement markers, and I want to just show you, these are the different pavement markers that we have. Monodirectional white, yellow, 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 white, red. Okay, so we have them available for you to use, and we're going to look at this 1030 skip right here. All right, so if I go back to the index, the RPMs go halfway in between each one of these 10-foot stripes. The easiest way that you can get these in here is to go back to Geopack Road and come down here to Plans Preparation and look at the Draw Cell Group by Feature tool. The Draw Cell Group by Feature allows me to place either a group of cells or a single cell multiple times along a project, okay, or along an element, along an alignment. So the first thing is that it's got two tabs, Feature Group and Location. All right, on the Feature Group, this is where I would set all of these up. Click on the icon to open up the DDB, and this does work in conjunction with the DDB, so when it places it, it's getting all the attributes that you need for calculations. All right, select anything within the category that you need. Okay, so in this case, it's pavement markers, and I'll just tell that OK. And then once it's here, and I selected that category, I can select any one that I want. Okay, so I'm going to use the white reds, and then I'm going to look at the location tab. On the location tab, there's a lot of information here that I have in order to manipulate what I have going on. First thing is that I want to use a DGN element, and so let's look at selecting that because we have this line sitting out here from before. Okay, and my begin, may need to do a little math here. I've got the 50 feet plus the 15, so I want them to start at 65 feet. My buffer distance for these are going, since they're down the middle, are going to be set to 0. My end, I'm going to leave it to the length because if it doesn't have, it'll place them evenly along that element. Okay, so there's a total of 40 feet within one group or one section. So my increment's going to be 40. I have different options in here. Increment, even, max spacing, and these do pretty much what it says. Even would be wherever I tell it to start, it's going to go to the next even increment. So if I told it to start at 25 and it was at an even 10, it would start at 30. Okay. Max spacing, it looks at the length of the line and it says, okay, how many can I get in here? And then adjusts the spacing so that everything will fit. Okay. Given the increment that you have, you can place just once at each vertex or endpoints of the elements that you select. All right. The buffer distances are if I want to place these cells at an offset. I can put that in here. No, the buffer distance, that's from the begin point, which I'm going to leave it set to 0. This was just another way to do it. If I had told this 50, I could set this to 15. And then it would place it and start at 15 feet. That's what the buffers do. And if I want it to stop prior to getting to the end at a certain distance, I can put that distance in here as well. The offset, if I want to place it offset from this line, that's over here on feature group here. I got that backwards, I apologize. All right, so angle, I'm going to leave that set to 0. I could change if I needed to. I could make it 90 degrees, 180 degrees, depends on what you're trying to place, because this is good for not just for RPMs and the arrows, but there's a lot of other applications that you could use this for. So I can set the angle of the cell I'm going to place, and I can set it as being absolute or relative. Absolute is going to place it at that angle given whatever view you're at. So if you tell it to place it at 0, it's 0 based on the view. If I tell it relative, it's going to be at an angle of 0 based on the angle of the reference element. Okay. And my justification is from the center, which cell, and that's, I have an upstream and a downstream, so that's these cells. So based on which one of these am I justifying everything, center cell, and I want to do it by origin, okay, and then tell it to draw. When I tell it to draw, notice that it's kind of hard to see them, they're little, but it puts the RPMs in here all the way along that element. So now I have all the RPMs going all the way to the end. Okay, I could have created a selection set. Like I said, I only was focusing on the beginning. I could create a selection set, create a complex chain out of the element, and place them that way as well. Okay. If I want to set RPMs and do this line right here at an offset. I can come in here and I think it's 0.167 is 1 inch. These, according to the index, are offset by an inch from the line. Actually, it's the center line of that line. 3 plus 1, actually it's 4 inches, 0.33. Okay. Only in this case, let's get our element. All right, it's 50 feet, and my increment is going to be 20 feet. And don't go on the stop bar. So let's give this a buffer of 20 and tell it to draw. Yeah. And notice that I don't have to worry about plus or minus in this tool either. Just accept whichever side you want them to be placed on, accept it, and they'll get placed in there. All right. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit further and look at arrows. And I'm almost out of time. So if I look at the arrows, I want to change my group because there's not in there and I don't have a way of switching between categories. So I'm going to go down to thermoplastic and I'm going to go standard arrows. All right, just grab one in here and tell it okay. And then I can grab the one that I want from the drop down. So I'm going to use some left arrows for this left turn lane. Don't worry about, even though it shows something here, it won't place whatever's here unless I actually toggle it on. All right, so my offset needs to be 6 foot. Go to my location. I'm going to use this white line as my reference. And if I go back and look in the standard, I need to have, it's 25 feet from the begin to the, basically it's the point location where it's pointing to, okay? So the end of that arrow is where that 25 feet is, but the origin is at the bottom of that. So that's another 15.7 feet, okay? So I want to make sure that I set these buffers in here correctly. So if I grabbed this element, the start buffer, I need that to be 30.7. My end buffer, again, from the end of the line to the bottom of that turn arrow needs to be 25 feet. Accept that. I want to increment these every 100 feet. Pretty sure. And then use the max spacing instead of the increment. Okay. According to the standards, and this will turn out right, if I have more than, I believe it's 250 feet, 200 feet, up to 200 feet, you would have 3 arrows. After that, you need to add an arrow for every 100 feet. Okay. Setting it like this, it will figure it out for you and evenly space these things out for you like you need to. All right, so I'm going to tell it to leave it to relative and tell it to draw. And then you select whichever side of the line you need those turn arrows put into. So I accept it. And now I have my turn arrows placed into my file. I did, whenever I was going through all of these, I did notice something. It acted goofy, so I want to go ahead and tell you guys about this. If you have, I was trying to place these in, and if I had my angle set so that it was exactly parallel to this line, okay, so that was just flat, and I had my view rotated so that it was upside down. Okay, so if I flip this whole thing over 180 degrees in my view, when I set it to relative, it was placing these in here backwards. And I had to switch it to absolute. So there may be times that you may need to change these options and just pay attention to which end it's thinking is the begin and end so that you get your buffer distances right. All right. There are some more pavement tools that I want to take a look at. We've got some scenarios set up to kind of help visualize to make it easier for you guys to get what the tool's doing. So I'm going to hit File, Open. I'm going to open up this GSGN-SP-stripe. It comes with the data set. It's out there right now. All right. So where did the DNC go? Here we go. All right. If I set this to the pavement markings, we've looked at the striping tool, which is the first one. There's also 3 more, and these are basically used to draw our separations and our merges and our diverge markings, okay? I know in the index that there are places, so just be careful where you put these, where they have said, okay, we're not going to use these markings anymore. Okay, so be sure to double check the index. But I'm going to start with this separation. Okay, it brings up a very similar tool. There's a lot of models in here, but the separation views, that has this already set up and ready to go. I want to make sure that I grab the correct pay item in our, in this case, it's yellow, 18-inch. So I need to go back to, yep, solid, linear foot. Drag this out so I can see. All right, there's the white 18-inch and the yellow 18-inch. All right, so I'm going to double click on this and it sets my item. I can also click on item with the right one highlighted. I can set the distance between each one of the stripes that it's going to draw, right, which this example, it's 10 feet. I can set it to a fixed or a variable angle. We want to set it to fixed, 45 degrees. Tolerance is usually fine. But then I've got to look at, these are different based on each of these 3 different tools. But I have a begin point and an end point. So where am I going to start and where am I going to stop? And then it has a reference or pivot point. Okay. In here, this is why I like to show it like this, is because it makes it real easy for you to see what we're talking about. All right. And then, so I'll go ahead and set the begin point. If I can snap to it. And set my end point. Set my reference point. It needs to be up here. Basically somewhere alongside 1. And then we've got 2 sides. Okay, side 1 and side 2. And the way the tool works is that, even though this may not make a whole lot of sense, but the way it works is it gets the begin point, it finds this distance, okay, and then it starts to draw the stripe at whatever angle from side 2 up to side 1, okay? So it's important that you get these 2 sides correct so it draws right. All right, so side 2 is a single element. I'll go ahead and grab it and accept it. Create a selection set if I have multiple ones, like on side 1. Set it to selection set and then accept it. And once I have all this set up, I just say draw separation. And it, depending on the way the traffic's flowing, okay, and you're drawing here, I can move the cursor and it'll rotate these by the 90 degrees. Okay, so I want it to go like this when it's the way it's supposed to be, just accept it anywhere, and it draws the lines in. Okay, so that's separation. And then we have diverge. So let's open that model up real quick. Okay, and that's when I've got two lanes of traffic flowing in the same direction and then they split. So that's our diverge. Okay, and this one, it's basically the same. You set the item, you set the distance, but I'm not setting necessarily my angles in here. Basically, what I'm doing is that I'm telling it, okay, where's the wide end? Where is the narrow end? Okay, and then I need to define a breaking line. What it does is it uses all three of these points and creates an arc through those points, all right, in order to determine where those markings are going to meet up. All right, so let's take a look at what it does. So the wide end is down here. My narrow end is down here. And then I need to set a point somewhere in the middle to give it its breaking point. It needs to be roughly, I believe it's like 45. It's in the standard index. You'll have to look it up. All right, but I'm just going to use this point right here. And once I've accepted all of those, I set my two sides, and I want it to draw from this side first. So, and these are both single elements, so I can select side 1 and accept it. Side 2, select, and then accept it, and then tell it to draw. And it draws my line in. You can see right at this point, it hasn't drawn anything yet until I accept this. Okay, but it's showing you, just for display purposes, where that arc is that it created. And as soon as I accept it, it draws the lines and then that disappears. So if that's not correct, you can reset, change the breaking line point until it's in there like you need it to be. The merge acts pretty much the same way. So if I go to that model, all right, and merging is when I have two lanes of traffic coming together to flow in the same direction. All right, so again, you have your item, your distance, and then I have the wide end of my gore. Okay, and then I have a narrow end, but this one doesn't have the breaking point in the center. But it does basically the same thing. It's going to find these two lines and it's going to create for me a arc that's looking at these two lines, but it's going to come through and this point right here on your gore breakpoint. All right, so select side 1, and I'm going to select side 2, and then tell it to draw. Okay, I missed, I didn't set the begin point. That helps. All right, snap to our point. There we go. All right, so I've set the end, I set the wide end, the narrow end, my 2 points, and then draw, and you'll see that it created it, but it created it to the end point. So if I needed this to go further, I need to make sure that this point that I draw is further out here. Okay, and then once it's drawn, I accept it, and they're in the file. One last thing that I wanted to cover with the DNC, and that was the set mode. So I'm going to go to the set mode, and you'll notice that whichever one I have selected, it gives me the quote-unquote set dialog, even though it doesn't say set here. And I have an example of that in here as well. If I try to ID these lines, notice down here at the very bottom, no matching database item. Okay, so that means that DNC doesn't recognize it because it hasn't been, it doesn't have that special geopack attribute that gets assigned with DNC Manager. Okay, so in order to fix this, I've got some 6-inch white and I have some 6-inch yellow. All right, so I'm going to go find the 6-inch white. All right, and then tell it to set. Ad hoc attributes, if you don't know what's on them, it's best to go ahead and say replace, so it sets the default values of what's in here. When you're talking about all the pavement markings, these are locked ad hocs, so you definitely want to make sure that if there are any on there that they're overwritten, because when they're locked you can't see them. If I go to the design mode, there's no ad hoc box that pops up anywhere because all of the ad hocs associated with this line are locked. They are there, okay? But they're locked because they have a formula and a description for the pay item that's being used. So really this information shouldn't be changed as you go along. If there was something like a variable needed for a formula or something that needs to be customized, like design notes or something like that, those would be open and available, but anything that has to do with the pay items, those have been locked, okay? So I don't see them, but when I go to place the lines, I want to make sure that, and I'm in set mode, I change this to replace just in case you've got something on these lines. In this case, there isn't any, but you never really know. All right, so I can hit set and then accept it, and I can hit set again. I can also create a selection set. Let's see, create a selection set. Let's grab these 3 yellow, change it to 6-inch yellow, and then tell it to set. Now if I try to ID these items or elements, it's going to take me to that element within, or that item within the DNC. All right, and I can ID this and look at it. And if I want to verify the ad hocs that are associated with this element, did they get on there? In our workspace, we have turned off the ability to see that, okay? Because it, especially with a lot of the cells that we place, there's some items that are out here that all you have to do is just hover over it and it would crash MicroStation. So we have a configuration variable that turns all that off, and you want it to be off. It's not worth it to have everything just crashing all the time. Trick, you can go to Geopack Road and open up the 3PC Ad Hoc Attribute Manager. And I have the option to hit the item identify element, and it will place what ad hocs that I have as well as their values into this box. But the trick part is that as long as I have this open, I can now hover over it, and that allows me to see the ad hocs. I can't see much of anything else on there, but I can see the ad hocs because it's associated with that tool. Okay, so I can now see that everything has been tagged. It's got the right ad hocs on it. Other thing that you can go through, and I like to do this before I quantify my elements, just to make sure I have everything set correctly, I will go in here and I'll say, okay, 6-inch white. I look at the display option and I can tell it a couple of things. I can tell it I want to highlight everything that's 6-inch white. I can hide the 6-inch white, or I can hide everything else and just show the 6-inch white. Usually the highlight option works the best, but sometimes you may want to use those other modes depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, but this is a real good way of verifying what's in your file. I know that I'm only human. A lot of times you get busy, you're on a roll, you forget, you're placing all these lines, and you'll forget to change it from a 6-inch line to an 8-inch line. It's just a matter of an element here. If I highlight it, it's going to show up. If I just wanted to check everything at one time, just to make sure everything is just tagged, I could grab the entire, pavement marking category and tell it to display, and then everything should turn this purple color. What is the purpose of preformed thermo versus standard thermo? Preformed thermo is more durable. They're placed in two different ways. One is heated up to a certain temperature and it kind of melts. It's got the reflectivity is these glass spheres that's inside of it, and it will go in and melts them. Basically, it melts into the asphalt, and that's standard thermo. And the problem with that is that if it's a high traffic area and you have a lot of turn movement on it, a lot of times that it is just not durable enough and it starts to come up and not work like it's supposed to. So preformed is tougher. It's placed all at one time. We recommend preformed on concrete surfaces as well as some of the special marking. We've got some new roundabout approach arrows, and they're the fish hooks. Those will be preformed. Any of your bike lane markings, those are preformed. Any of your route markers or the route shields, multicolored route shields, those are all preformed. All of those don't have paint that we put underneath them when we place them. So basically that's the difference in deciding, do I want to use preformed or do I want to use standard? Go to chapter 7 of the PPM volume 1, and it has a chart in there that tells you if I've got concrete, I have asphalt, is it transverse, is it longitudinal, is it other? Other is all of your arrows and messages that you would place. That will help you figure out what material do you need to be using. Thermoplastic is considered a permanent marking. So my thermoplastic and my permanent tape, those are permanent markings. Paint is not. It's considered temporary. With the permanent markings, you've got to wait 14 days before placing them. So the temporary marking is the paint, and it's covered under 71090. When you calculate all of these items for the thermoplastic, if you're supposed to have paint, I'm quantifying the paint for you, okay? If you realize that it didn't calculate the paint and it's questionable and you're not sure, contact either me, Chester Henson. One of us can answer your question and verify, yes, it's doing what it's supposed to, or no, it's not. Open graded versus other surfaces. Basically, it has to do with the type of surface, whether or not the open graded, you have to have a certain thickness for the thermoplastic when they place it and lay it down. And when you place it on the open graded surfaces, it's not as the rocks and the asphalt basically are not as small as the other surfaces. So open graded, those are bigger. So it kind of falls between the cracks and you don't get the thickness. So that's why we have the difference in the two pay items, so that depending on the type of friction course that you use, if it's an open graded friction course or not, they have to have the right, basically you need more of the thermoplastic in order to get it on the open graded surface, if that makes sense. Is it wrong to just select 6-inch white and then use the striping tool to put down the 1030, the 2.4, etc., and not use the skip dotted or the guidelines? As far as creating a set of construction plans, no, it's not wrong per se. You'll have it on the right levels. We actually have separate levels for each one of the skips as well. However, when you try to automate the calculations, you're going to get it wrong. DNC is actually looking for an ad hoc attribute on them in order to determine its pay item. the unit, as well as the special Geopack attribute tag that is associated with it in order to calculate. So if you do them that way, you're not going to be able to use the DNC to automate your calculations. Where is the ad hoc attribute manager again? It is located two places. You can go to Geopack, Road, 3PC ad hoc attribute manager. I can also go to this element attributes if all I want to do is look and I don't want to change. That also opens up a tool that allows me to identify a civil element. And it puts the DDB feature, okay, so that's the attribute that's associated with it, and as well as the ad hocs that are associated with it. Okay, the other place that you can get to the 3PC ad hoc attribute manager is to go to the quantities, and then it's the second icon in, and that will also open up the same tool. Just depends on which way you want to go. Do you want to go through the menus, or do you want to go through the task menus? Okay, well, that is everyone's questions. I will get all of those answered into a Q&A document that will also be posted if you want to come back for reference. Chapter 5 documentation will be posted out there on the YouTube and the CAT office website with the webinar recording. Looks like that's all the questions. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. If you have any issues with any of this stuff, please let us know. We'll be happy to help you. Meantime, like I said, have a great day, have a great week. And next week, hopefully you'll be back, and we are going to be looking at guide signs and draw sign to accomplish getting our signing into our plans